Welcome back, listeners, to Radio 13, The Hidden Nightmares, Episode 03. Tonight, we've got some terrifyingly thrilling new stories lined up just for you. Get ready for a spine-chilling ride. Let's kick things off with our first story from Rebecca. Sit back and listen closely. You won't want to miss
it. It was a late night, and the moon bathed the schoolyard in a silvery glow, casting an air of mystery and stillness over everything. Elijah, my best friend since high school, and I decided to visit the school's fountain to take some final pictures before she moved to Texas. We stood in front of the large granite plaque, a spot that had been a gathering place for students during special occasions. Elijah and I, longtime friends who had shared countless memories within these walls, were determined to make one last memory before she moved to Texas. We decided on a late-night visit to the school's iconic fountain, a place that had seen everything from jubilant celebrations to quiet, contemplative moments. It was here that we would take our final photos together, a bittersweet tribute to the end of an era. The fountain's grand marble plaque stood before us, its surface glistening in the moonlight. We positioned ourselves for the first shot, laughing as we tried to capture the perfect angle. The night air was crisp and cool, and the only sounds were the gentle splashing of water and our occasional bursts of laughter. "Let's make this one count," Elijah said, adjusting her camera. Her voice, though excited, carried a hint of melancholy, an unspoken acknowledgement that this would be our last night here together. I smiled, nodding in agreement. Absolutely, we need to make it one. As we posed for another photograph, I noticed the atmosphere had subtly shifted. The air felt thicker, as if the very night was holding a secret. I shrugged off the feeling, attributing it to the late hour and our growing sense of nostalgia. But then, a strange sound cut through the silence. A soft, disembodied giggle that seemed to come from just behind the marble plaque. I froze, my laughter dying in my throat. I glanced at Elijah, who had also gone silent. We exchanged uneasy looks, both sensing that something was amiss. "Elijah, did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her eyes wide with concern. "Yeah, I heard it too. It didn't sound like any of the usual night noises." Curiosity mingled with apprehension as I slowly approached the plaque, trying to peer behind it. The shadows cast by the moonlight danced across the stone, creating shifting patterns that played tricks on my eyes. Just as I was about to dismiss it as a figment of my imagination, a dark shape materialized from the darkness, a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the night. My heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran down my spine. I tried to call out, but no sound came from my mouth. The figure's eyes, burning with an unsettling light, seemed to follow our every move. The giggling grew louder, more insistent, and it felt as though it was closing in on us. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Elijah's arm. Her face was pale, her expression mirroring my own fear. "We need to get out of here," I said urgently. Without another word, we bolted from the fountain, our footsteps echoing in the empty night. The laughter seemed to follow us, growing more distant but never truly fading. We ran through the campus, not daring to look back until we reached the safety of the streetlights. Breathless and trembling, we leaned against the side of my car, the reality of what we had just experienced sinking in. The fountain, now a distant, dark silhouette, seemed to watch us with its silent, eerie gaze. "What was that?" Elijah asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted, still trying to catch my breath, "but I don't want to find out." We stayed in stunned silence, the weight of the night's events hanging heavily between us. "I don't know," I admitted, still trying to catch my breath, "but I don't want to find out." We stayed in stunned silence, the weight of the night's events hanging heavily between us. Once safely home, the image of the shadowy figure and the haunting laughter lingered in my mind. I couldn't sleep, the red eyes etched vividly into my thoughts. I reached out to Elijah to share my fear, but she too was unable to make sense of the encounter. In the nights that followed, I was plagued by dreams of the shadow and the ghostly laughter. It felt as though an ominous presence was always lurking, waiting for the right moment to return. Whenever I heard a giggle in the dead of night, I would shudder, feeling that presence watching me, despite my efforts to forget the haunting memory. Months later, Elijah called me from Texas, revealing that she too had been plagued by strange dreams involving the fountain and the unsettling laughter. We didn't know if the malevolent presence was trying to connect us from afar, but we both agreed that the memory of that night would never fade.
A big thank you to Rebecca for that captivating and haunting story. How did it leave you feeling? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's dive into our second story of the evening, a thrilling tale from Theodore that promises to be just as intriguing. Stay tuned.
I'm here to tell you a story that I swear is true. A tale that unfolds almost every night at precisely 3 a.m., right next to Westminster Memorial Park on Hazard Street, just north of the cemetery. It was close to 3 a.m. when I was heading home. I was approaching a junction near the entrance to Midway Sanitarium when my car suddenly stalled. I pulled over to the side of the road, right by the cemetery, to check what was wrong. As I stepped out of the car, I noticed two figures walking along the perimeter fence of the cemetery. One was tall, the other short. They were walking from Beach Street towards Hoover, but they were right up against the B40 fence. This fence was built tight against the ditch with no passage through it. On the other side of the ditch was another B40 fence before you even reached the cemetery. I couldn't figure out why these two people would be out here at this hour, let alone walking so close to the fence. Feeling uneasy, I climbed back into my car to keep an eye on them. As they neared the intersection where I was parked, something truly terrifying happened. Both figures slowly began to rise into the air, arms outstretched like they had wings, and then they soared into the cemetery. My heart raced. I was paralyzed with fear and couldn't bring myself to get out of the car. I immediately called my family to come and get me. A few days later, I shared this story with a few friends. They laughed it off, saying I must have been imagining things or trying to scare them. I dared them to come and see for themselves if they didn't believe me. They said, "Sure, why not? We're not scared of ghosts." So, I suggested we all go to the cemetery area that very night before 3 a.m. They agreed. We drove there together and parked right by Hazard Street, near the turnoff into the sanitarium. It was around 2:30 a.m., and nothing unusual happened. My friends started to think I was making it up. I insisted, "It's not 3 a.m. yet. Just wait." We waited anxiously in the car. As the clock inched closer to 2:50, then 2:55, then 2:59, I told them to look towards Beach Street. The night was eerily quiet. The moon was waxing and waning, and traffic was sparse. At exactly 3 a.m., the two ghostly figures appeared just as I had described. They followed the same path along the fence. One of my friends said, "That's nothing. Those are probably security guards patrolling the cemetery, not ghosts." I told them to wait and see. As the figures came closer to where we were parked, both of them once again slowly lifted into the air, arms spread wide as if they were flying, and then they vanished into the cemetery right before our eyes. My friends, who had been so brave and dismissive earlier, were now huddled together, trembling and urging, "Let's get out of here now." At that moment, they finally believed me. It was a night that left us all shaken. And to this day, I've seen those figures one more time, exactly at 3 a.m., proving that some things are very real, indeed. As I sit here, reflecting on that night, I can't shake the unease that still lingers. The memory of those ghostly figures floating effortlessly through the cemetery has etched itself into my mind. I've tried to rationalize what I saw to convince myself that there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps a trick of the light or an optical illusion. But deep down, I know the truth of what I witnessed. I remember the terror I felt when the figures first began to rise into the air. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot by a fear that was both primal and profound. It's strange how our minds can play tricks on us, conjuring up the most terrifying scenarios when faced with the unknown. Yet, the fear I felt that night was real and palpable. A stark reminder of our vulnerability in the face of the supernatural. What haunts me the most is not just the sight of those figures, but the eerie calmness of that night. The way the world seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something extraordinary to happen. The silence, broken only by the distant murmur of traffic and the occasional rustle of the wind, created a backdrop for the supernatural event that unfolded before us. Even now, I find myself drawn to that area, almost as if I'm searching for answers, or perhaps trying to make sense of what I saw. I drive past the cemetery sometimes, hoping to catch a glimpse of those figures again, not out of a desire for more fear, but in a desperate attempt to understand the unknown. It's as if the haunting has become a part of me, a thread woven into the fabric of my everyday life. My friends, who initially dismissed my experience, now share in my unease. They talk about it in hushed tones as if speaking too loudly might summon the very ghosts we saw. We've all become more cautious about the stories we hear and the places we visit. It's a strange bond we share, one forged in fear and disbelief. As I recount this tale, I realize how profoundly it has affected me. It's not just the sight of the figures that stays with me, but the way it has reshaped my understanding of reality. It's a reminder that there are forces beyond our comprehension, lurking in the shadows of our world. And while I may never fully understand what I saw that night, I've learned to accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The memory of that night serves as a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. It's a lesson in humility and a testament to the mysteries that still exist, just beyond the reach of our understanding.
Thank you to Theodore for that amazing story. It was truly outstanding. So what did you think of Theodore's tale? Sometimes there are phenomena that defy explanation, but it's incredibly powerful to share and connect with others about these experiences, don't you think? Now let's move on to our next story. Sit back and listen closely, folks.
I'm Jordan, the owner of a repair shop on Hazard Street. I'll never forget that night. It's still fresh in my mind, sending shivers down my spine every time I think about it. It all started when a man brought in a Dodge Caravan, desperate for repairs. The shop was already full with other cars, so I suggested he leave the van and come back the next day or later. But he insisted, "I need this vehicle fixed right away. I'll pay whatever it takes." I agreed to work on it that night if he took one of my personal cars in the meantime. After he left, I opened the van's trunk to inspect the damage. What I saw made my blood run cold. The van had been cut in half and poorly welded back together. The damage was severe, more than a typical repair job could handle in a single night. Determined to get it done for the desperate customer, I settled in for a long night. As I worked, I began hearing unsettling noises from inside the van, an eerie plaintive meowing as if a cat were trapped inside. I shone my flashlight inside but found nothing. I checked around the van and under it, but there was no sign of any animal. I tried to push the sounds out of my mind and focused on the repairs. Then the driver's side door creaked open by itself. My heart raced. This was a manual, not automatic. I backed away, my pulse pounding in my ears. Just as I was trying to steady my nerves, the passenger side door slammed shut with a force that made me jump. Then came the most disturbing part. From the back seat, I heard what unmistakably sounded like a human moan, a deep, tortured sound that seemed to reverberate through the van. The noise grew louder, more desperate, as if someone or something was trying to reach out. A cold sweat broke out on me. I have a habit of keeping my cell phone and keys on the front seat of the car I'm working on. The sudden realization that I had left them inside the van with whatever was making those noises made my stomach churn. I bolted from the van, but the doors slammed shut behind me, trapping my phone and keys inside. Panicked, I ran to a nearby shop where I knew the owner. My hands were shaking as I asked to use their phone to call a friend for help. My friend answered groggily, clearly annoyed by the late call. I told him I needed assistance with a stuck car. When my friend arrived, the scene was even more chilling. As he approached, the van's doors opened wide on their own. I could feel a draft coming from inside, as if something unseen was exhaling a cold breath. My heart was in my throat as I hurried to retrieve my phone and keys. My friend asked, "So, which car are we moving?" I could barely respond. "Forget it. It's done now. Thanks for coming." He gave me a puzzled look, but didn't press further. We both left quickly, and I could feel a palpable sense of dread lingering in the air. The next day, I told my friend and the van's owner what happened. To this day, the memory of that night haunts me. I've never been able to explain the noises or the eerie events that unfolded. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the shop, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the van's doors creaking open by themselves, or to hear that chilling moan again. As I sit here now, reflecting on that night, I can't help but feel a chill creeping down my spine. It's been years since that eerie event, but it's as vivid as ever. I find myself haunted by more than just the noises and the sight of those malfunctioning doors. It's the underlying sense of dread that lingers long after the incident. Sometimes I wonder if I was just imagining things. After all, I was working late and maybe fatigue played tricks on my mind. Deep down, I know what I heard and felt was real. The way those doors opened and closed on their own, the gut-wrenching moans from the back seat. It was as if the van itself was alive, or maybe it was holding on to something dark and malevolent that it couldn't let go of. The worst part is the feeling of being watched. Even now, when I'm alone in the shop late at night, I catch myself glancing nervously around, half expecting to see something, or someone, lurking in the shadows. I often wonder if whatever was in that van is still out there, waiting for another opportunity to reach out from the darkness. I've since been more cautious about the vehicles I work on, especially those with an unsettling past. I try to shake off the feeling, but it's there, an ever-present reminder of that night. Every time I hear a strange noise or see something out of place, I can't help but remember the van, the moans, and that feeling of icy fear. I try to stay rational, to tell myself it was just a series of coincidences and a bit of fatigue. But deep down, there's a part of me that's still haunted by that experience. A part that remains vigilant, always on edge, wondering if that chill will ever come back.
Thank you to Jordan for that chilling story. Well, folks, we've just experienced 3 different stories, each bringing its own mix of suspense, anxiety, and fear. We hope the unique thrills and haunting elements of each tale have provided you with an unforgettable experience. Now let's take a short break before we dive into our next segment, horror stories from around the world. Stay tuned.
Make my heart ache in despair. In the dark, the moon's pale light, cold winds chill me to the bone. Old shadows still return, leading me into a realm unknown. Eyes shining like stars when cold as ice, footsteps creeping inside memories pressed down, won't release, guiding me through every haunting dream. In the dark, nightmares drift, shadows waiting there, whispers like the wind's caress, make my heart ache in despair. In the dark, the moon's pale light, cold winds chill me to the bone. Old shadows still return, leading me into a realm unknown. Eyes shining like stars when cold as ice, footsteps creep deep inside memories pressed down, won't release, guiding me through every haunting dream. In the dark, nightmares drift, shadows waiting there, whispers like the wind's caress, make my heart ache in despair. Haunting paintings from the past, a chilling smile full of dread, footsteps on a phantom road, marking dreams that have long been dead. Eyes shining like stars when cold as ice, breaths that scream deep inside memories pressed down, won't release, guiding me through every haunting dream. Let go now, just let go. away in endless night. Though the path is far and cool, fear remains deep in my soul. In the dark, nightmares drift, shadows waiting there. Whispers like the wind's caress make my heart ache in despair. In the dark, nightmares drift, only sorrow left within me. Shadows slowly fade away, but the fear stays with me eternally.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Now, it's time for our segment, Horror Stories from Around the World. Tonight, we bring you The Silent Servant. Sit back, relax, and listen closely. This one's going to be chilling. The Silent Servant. Long ago, in a grand estate where luxury knew no bounds, there was a beautiful maid. Her beauty was mesmerizing, so much so that even the master of the house could not help but admire her. His lingering gaze did not go unnoticed by his wife, who became consumed with jealousy and anger. Desperate to rid herself of the competition, the wife devised a cruel plan. She sent the maid on an errand to a distant place, hoping she would never return. But fate had other plans. The maid completed her task and returned, standing once again in the house where she worked. Her presence infuriated the wife beyond measure. Blinded by rage, the wife commanded her servants to commit unspeakable acts upon the poor girl. They tore out her fingernails, shaved her head, and ripped out her eyelashes. The wife, with twisted satisfaction, cut the girl's mouth from ear to ear, stretching her once delicate smile into a grotesque before a permanent grin. The girl's teeth were forcefully yanked out one by one, and her body was seared with a red-hot iron. Finally, in a final act of cruelty, they sealed her inside the walls of the grand mansion, leaving only a small air vent, a cruel reminder of her suffering. The house fell silent. Days turned to weeks, and soon the wife began to feel at ease, believing the nightmare was over. But one night, as she lay beside her husband in their lavish bed, she felt an unease creep over her. The air in the room felt heavy, oppressive. She couldn't sleep. There was an unmistakable sensation that someone or something was watching her. Frozen with fear, she didn't dare move. She could only pull the covers tightly over her head and squeeze her eyes shut, hoping the feeling would pass. Terrified, she reached out to her husband, seeking comfort. Her hand found his. At least, she thought it was his. But the hand she held was cold, clammy, and slick with a sticky, foul-smelling liquid. Worse yet, it had no fingernails. Her heart pounded in her chest as she slowly opened her eyes. The stench of decay filled the air, and in the dim moonlight, she saw her husband sleeping soundly beside her, completely unaware of the horror unfolding. Suddenly, the sheets were pulled away, and standing at the foot of the bed was the maid. Her once beautiful face was now a twisted, mutilated mass of agony. Her wide, bloody smile stretched across her face, and where her teeth once were, there was only a black abyss. The wife screamed, but no one came to her aid. The servants would later find her lifeless, her face frozen in terror, her mouth torn open in the same grotesque smile that the maid now wore. And to this day, in that grand estate, they say if you lie in bed with jealousy in your heart, you might just feel a soft, cold hand reaching out for yours. A hand without fingernails, covered in something sickeningly warm and wet. And when you do, know that the silent servant has returned, looking for her revenge. Thank you to all our listeners for tuning in and joining us for tonight's stories. That brings us to the end of this evening's broadcast. We wish you all a relaxing and joyful weekend. Take care, and we'll see you next Saturday night. Support us by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to our channel. For more thrilling horror stories, visit our website at hradioxii.lovstoblog.com/ and don't miss out on our store at radio-store.printfy.me/products to grab your favorite items for the 2024 Halloween season.
long.